You're listening to the Vibrant Vision Podcast, a podcast designed to help you get clarity, increase your confidence, and cultivate the most important connections so you can have the impact you were created to make. I'm your host, Amanda Kerrigan. Now let's get to making that vibrant vision a reality. Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Vibrant Vision Podcast. You know, the crazy thing is we're already in February. And if you feel like me, you're like, wow, where did January go? And then, wow, I did a lot, but did I accomplish what is most important? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. What is most important? Last episode, we talked about our failures and how to bounce back, how to succeed after failing. And a lot of times, the reason, especially that I see with clients, is when they're looking at their failures and they're like, wow, I didn't do what I wanted to do. It's because they were busy doing everything else. So that's a huge thing that gets in the way. And that's why I wanted to do this episode, is so that you don't make that mistake in 2023. So a lot of times what happens is we try and do everything because everything feels important. And then we end up chasing our tails like my Labrador, doing everything except what's really important. Does that sound familiar to you? If so, there's no shame. You're not alone. But this episode is here to help you. Because you can't determine what's most important if everything is equally important. When I was in coaching school, my instructors explained it this way. This is really basic, but maybe it'll help you. We're juggling a bunch of balls on a daily basis. And those balls are labeled spiritual life, family, friends, social, church, ministry, because ministry is not the same thing as church. And of course, our career, our finances, we're juggling all of these balls. But here's the thing. Some of those balls are rubber, meaning if you drop them for a week or a month, they'll bounce. But some of those balls are glass. So if you drop them, going to be some damage done. And here's the thing that we do. We treat our rubber balls like our glass balls and our glass balls like our rubber balls because our glass balls don't always shatter when we drop them. Maybe they'll chip. You might have a little bit of a hairline fracture, but you're like, man, it's still intact. It's all right. It's all good. And then all of a sudden they shatter and they shatter in a big way. Your marriage is falling apart. You get a health diagnosis because of the choices that you've been making about your food and your lack of exercise and your lack of sleep for the last 30 years. Then you really have to pay attention not only to juggling that glass ball, but to putting it back together. And ain't nobody got time for that. So if we set our priorities early, then we won't have to do that. So that's what we're going to do. And if that's you, if you're putting together a glass ball, you know what? Concentrate on that. That becomes your priority. Okay? And if you're listening to this episode going, wow, what are my priorities? And you have a glass ball that shattered, boom, that's your priority. Let me just help you out right now. Okay? But if you're like, wow, I've got some balls in the air and I'm juggling them all and none of them have shattered, then this episode is really for you. In this episode, I'm going to outline a process for you, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. But it is going to be necessary. So I'm just going to warn you, none of the work that we really do that matters is stuff that we can microwave. This is a crock pot exercise, okay? But first, I want to talk to you a little bit about priorities and why they're important and what they mean. But this episode is really so that you can thrive in 2023 and beyond. So what is a priority? I like this definition. I read it last night and I just had to put it in this episode. It's from Carey Nieuwhof, and he says, a priority is simply a pre-decision about my time. I'm going to say that again. A priority is simply a pre-decision about my time. So a few principles about priorities. If it's just a pre-decision about my time, how I'm going to spend my time before things come up, before the urgent starts outweighing the important and starts screaming louder, because the urgent will always scream louder than the important. Okay? It will. But you have to learn that that urgent voice is just noise. All right, so a few principles, because it's just a pre-decision. If you do not set your own priorities, you've heard this before, right? Someone else is going to set them for you. Your kid's soccer coach is going to make bringing snacks every practice your top priority. Your life group is going to make hosting gatherings every week your top priority. Your sister is going to make venting about her husband for 45 minutes on the phone while you're trying to make dinner, help the kids with your homework, and oh yeah, get out the door for whatever you've got going on, piano recital, I don't know, her top priority, okay? And so here's the thing. If you spend your day reacting to calls and emails and demands and requests, so could you pretty please just take 5 minutes to do this? And we all do this. I did this to my coworker yesterday. And then I felt bad. I'm like, that's probably not her priority, but it was mine, right? So I made it hers and she let me. Whoops. But if you spend your day reacting to everything rather than being proactive, 2023 is going to go the way that every other year has gone. And you're going to say, where did it go? Because you're not going to move forward on what really matters. So are you exhausted yet? Yeah, me too. So let's move on. So the second thing is if you don't set priorities, you will drift. And nobody drifts to a destination that they wanted to go to, right? Like if you drift, you're going to go out to sea. You're going to be lost. I told you last episode that I live on the mighty Colorado River, and I've been rafting this river since I was 6. And I remember when I was, I think, 10 or 11, there was this couple, and they were just drifting around in the eddy, frantically rowing to try and get out. But they didn't know how to get out because there's a way to row out of an eddy. And they were just freaking out. And what had happened is they were like, well, the river was just so peaceful that we drifted. We just decided we didn't want to row and let the water take us where it will. Well, the water took it right into an eddy. Okay. And then my guide had to show them how to row to get out of the eddy. And so it might seem exhausting to constantly row, but picking up the oars every 2 to 3 minutes on the river, making sure you're heading in the right direction, helpful. Or even 30 seconds, depending on how it is, but you don't want to get stuck in an eddy. If you do, then know how to row out of it, okay? And in my coaching practice, I see so many people who have drifted into what I would call the eddies of life with no clue how to dig out of the financial or relational or health mess that they've gotten themselves into. Because let's face it, those are the big areas where we tend to drift. We tend to just spend and say, I'll take care of that credit card later. Or we tend to, how I treat them today doesn't really matter. Or I'll catch up with them and then we don't. I have some relationships like that. And I'm like, man, I need to make that my priority right now in this season. Or we drift with our health. I don't have to work out tonight. I'm too exhausted. I'm too tired. And the third thing I want you to know is priorities sometimes conflict. Life is full of right versus right choices. That's the way it is. I had a client a few years ago who was extremely conflicted because she knew she had an assignment coming up at work and that the client might request some last minute changes, but her daughter had her spring piano recital coming up, and her daughter was a very gifted pianist. She was 8. And my client was very concerned. And we talked about this because she didn't want to miss her daughter's piano recital. It felt like a priority, but if she didn't do this report, if she didn't serve this client in this particular way and do what needed to be done last minute to meet the deadline, she was also afraid she wouldn't be able to get the promotion, which means that her daughter would not be able to go to music camp because they couldn't afford it. And I tell you this story with my client's full permission. So what she ended up doing is sitting down with her daughter and saying, look, here's my dilemma. What's a priority for you? And her daughter's like, well, you've heard me play, and you don't need to go to this baby recital. I would rather go to music camp. I want to go to this camp. Like, it's going to be awesome, Mom. And she ended up being able to go to her daughter's piano recital, right? Because the client didn't need something that night, but it was a pre-decision about how she would spend her time and what was a priority, not just for her, because ultimately both decisions benefited her daughter. So her daughter was a priority, but then she had to ask her daughter what's a priority. So it's a great lesson for her little girl as well. Right versus right choices. Okay. And priorities shift depending on the season that we're in. I'm single with no kids. Okay. I love it. It's great. But I have a lot of friends who have kids. My very best friend in the whole world is single, but she has a 15-year-old son. Her priorities are a little bit different from mine. Granted, he's pretty independent, but there are things that she wants to do with her son. And then finally, knowing your priorities empowers you. It gives you the power to choose. It's a pre-decision. It lets you know that you can spend your time in a way that is proactive rather than reacting to every decision. And then you can filter every urgent request through that lens of priorities. Is this a priority right now? Because some things look like a great opportunity, but then their time sucks, masquerading as great opportunities. And it's important for you to know the difference. And knowing and sticking to your priorities will help you avoid burnout. A firm no is better than a resentful and under-resourced yes every time. And no is not a four-letter word. It is better. It is better. And a lot of people don't understand that if you are giving a resentful and under-resourced yes, you have said no to what is most important for the sake of pleasing somebody else. So you've got to protect your time, which is not renewable, and protect your energy, which is finite. You've got to renew it, but you only have so much energy to give during the day. And this will help you avoid burnout so that you can do your most important work and also play full out. Because that's what life is all about, right? Is doing our most important work, doing the things that God has called us to do, and enjoying it. So how the heck do you determine your priorities? I told you that this was not going to be an easy thing to do. So the first thing you have to do, as Stephen Covey famously said, is begin with the end in mind. So what do you want your life to look like at the very end? And I've cited this book a couple of times on my podcast, but it bears repeating. Sorry, hold on. I've talked about this book before on my podcast and my blog, but it was formative in my coaching practice. The book is called Living Forward. It's by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkeby. And in it, they outline this process where you write out your eulogy, which is morbid, right? But you write out what you want people to say about you at the end of your life. So if my family's listening, you can just read mine at my funeral. Just kidding. I don't know if it's entirely accurate yet, but I'm getting there. So basically, picture your funeral, stand in front of those people, look out at all the people that are there, your parents, if, they're still kicking, because, hey, I could go tomorrow, My grandparents are there. When I look at my funeral, my sisters, my brothers-in-law, my niece and nephew, my friends. And I think about what would I want them to say? And write that out, because that will give you a track to run on what's most important. And I think about what I want my colleagues to say about me, my coaching colleagues, my clients, and my colleagues at the VA. So when you write this out, just be very cognizant. Who are you picturing? Because those are your most important relationships. How are you investing? And then what do you want them to say? Because you have the power to choose. A lot of times we think, oh, that's my funeral. I'll be dead. Yeah, that's right. So while you're alive, choose how you want to live so that they say things about you that you would want to hear if you were around. So the next thing is to make a list of your specific life areas. Your health, your career, your finances, your relationships, and make a list. Okay? Because that list is going to drive how you spend your time. Because work-life balance isn't dedicating equal amounts of time to everything. If it was, I would spend much less time working, right? And much more time playing music. Okay? So here are some thoughts for you on this. So I already mentioned health, career, your family, your friends and social life, your finances, your hobbies. What are your hobbies? What do you enjoy doing? Because this is seriously something that we neglect and we want to act like self-care is just sitting on the couch with Netflix and a tub of ice cream, and it's not. That's another rant for another podcast episode. But your spiritual life, what does your spiritual life look like? Is it how you want it to be? What does your self-development look like? Your self-improvement? How are you growing this year? Because we talked about this in a couple of episodes ago. Thriving is growing. And being a vibrant visionary means that you never stop growing because vibrancy means that you are fully alive. So make a list of those areas. And then once you're done with that, I'm going to ask you to pause the podcast real quick. Make a list of those areas. Because this next one is going to blow your mind. And I don't want you to move on until you've made a list of those areas, okay? Because the next part of this is hard. Priority actually means that we are setting one thing that is over everything else. What is that one thing for you in this season? What is most important to you right now in this season? Write it down because something just came to mind for you. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's your health. Maybe, maybe it's your finances. It's like, I got to whip this into shape. I don't know what it is for you in this season because remember, priorities shift. So what is your top priority right now? Okay. And then write down your next one. What's next after that? You had that thing squared away. What's next? Write that down. Now I want you to ask this question. It's rough. It's horrible. This over that. Is priority 1 more important than priority 2? And you're going to have some conflict on this. Is my relationship with my spouse more important than my relationship with my kids? If you can't have a good relationship with your spouse, your partner in parenting, then what kind of example are you setting for your kids? Or if you don't have a good relationship with your kids and there's all this strife in your home, maybe that's what's going on. And it's creating problems for you and your spouse. And if you could solve this, then that would solve the problems for your spouse. See what I mean? There's no right or wrong answer, and there's no judgment in this exercise. This is just for you. So keep writing those down. Is this more important than that? I remember experiencing some serious angst when this happened. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm putting my spiritual life above everything else, but it needed some work. This was 2016 when I did this. And I was like, are you kidding me? But here's the thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot do anything if my cup is not full. So if your priority right now is your hobby because you're feeling emptied out and you just need to fill that cup, then that's okay. Because we cannot serve from an empty cup. We can't put everybody else's oxygen mask on before our own. So if that's your priority, no judgment. I know that this is a hard exercise, and that's on purpose. We often make easy choices in the moment that result in us having to make hard choices later. Because we don't want to make the hard trade-offs later. And just remember, this is your priority in your season. Your health might be your priority, And then you'll get down to a healthy weight. You'll install a workout habit. You'll install healthy eating habits. And then you can move on to something else and make that your priority. That's okay. And if something surprised you, give that some attention, right? Because if it surprised you, then that means that you haven't been giving it the proper attention. That's okay too. So I know that this process is going to take you some time and it's hard. And this is a challenging thing for me too. It takes time. It takes time to learn. And if you have problems with priorities, if you're like, I just can't do this on my own, I can't sort through this on my own, then set up a time with me to chat. I'll put my email address in the show notes so that we can set up a time to chat. And if you're listening and you want to write it down right now, it is amanda@vibrantvision.coach. Being a vibrant visionary means that you know your priorities. And it means also that you're willing to make the hard sacrifices today so that you don't have to make them later and make them even harder. I just want to encourage you, as you set your priorities, just know that this is just a pre-decision about how you're going to spend your time. And that things can be flexible. I mean, life is all about being flexible. This just gives you a way to make those healthy decisions. If you've enjoyed this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share it with somebody who needs to hear it? Maybe you have somebody in your life who's like really struggling with priorities and not sure what to do. If you could just share this with them, I would be so grateful. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. This podcast publishes every 2 weeks with another episode. Until then, live your vibrant vision. Are you doing #all the things to build your dream life and business, but still not seeing the results you want? The truth is that being a vibrant visionary and having a vibrant vision is more than just making money. It means making an impact in all areas of your life that matter to you. And this requires clarity on what you want and the steps that you need to take to go after that dream, and confidence to take the actions on your goals so that you can reach them. And finally, connections to spirit, your true authentic self, and those you serve. If you're ready to finally have the impact you dream of, let's talk. Book your complimentary clarity session at vibrantvision.coach/schedule. That's vibrantvision.coach/schedule.